Making and releasing a movie that connects with audiences at large is basically a miracle in its own right. But it's fair to say that sometimes movies end up getting huge for all the wrong reasons. Now, the overwhelming majority of these films are very good, any way you slice it, but where the consensus breaks down is why they're good. And for many, they fundamentally misinterpreted the very message the movie was putting into the world, or just flat out ignored what it was truly about. So with that being said, I'm Jem from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 movies that are popular for all the wrong reasons. Number 10. Whiplash. Whiplash is a film often considered inspirational, what with the likes of basketball players Kobe Bryant and Kyrie Irving loudly lauding its depiction of a person striving for greatness, and even the movie's critical consensus on Rotten Tomatoes calling it inspiring. The film follows an ambitious jazz drummer, Andrew Neiman, played by Miles Teller, who is pushed to perfect his skills by an objectively abusive instructor, Terrence Fletcher, played by an Oscar-winning J.K. Simmons. But like so many other movies on this list, the drum-tight technical execution by director Damien Chazelle and pitch-perfect performances make it so easy to see Whiplash as a celebration of abuse rather than a condemnation of it. For many, Whiplash has been held up as a frank indication of just what it takes to reach the pinnacle of any profession or art form, that sacrificing almost everything you have is a necessity to join the 1%. But let's be real, Whiplash is really a tragedy in plain sight, that Neiman's pursuit of perfection led him down a path of self-destruction. Hell, Chazelle himself even believes that Neiman ends up dying of a drug overdose a few years later, which seems to settle the argument. Number 9. Fight Club. David Fincher's Fight Club is a mesmerizing movie, albeit one that made a tidal impact with all the wrong people for all the wrong reasons. The stylish seductiveness of Fincher's filmmaking combined with the sheer coolness of Brad Pitt's Tyler Durden character tricked many into holding it up as a masculinist screed, with Durden being the apparent ideal to which all men should aspire. As the leader of a generation of men who see themselves without a place in modern society, many found identification with Tyler. Yet, seeing Tyler as aspirational, of course, completely glosses over the fact that Durden is not only a terrorist, but a figment of the protagonist, played by Edward Norton's, imagination, and one who is ultimately killed in the ending when he seeks a different path. There are, of course, those who simply appreciate Fight Club for being an extremely well-made and brilliantly acted film packed with interesting themes, but the most vocal supporters are generally the bros who unironically see it as a model for life rather than the cautionary tale that it actually is. Number 8. 500 Days of Summer. Like Fight Club, 500 Days of Summer is a film that saw masses of young men identify with it, feeling that it so perfectly bottled their frustrations with modern life, in particular, the dating scene. Protagonist Tom, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, quickly finds himself falling for co-worker Summer, played by Zooey Deschanel, with the pair soon embarking on a casual relationship. While Summer maintains she isn't looking for anything serious, Tom falls for her deep. Ultimately, the fact that the story is framed around Tom's experiences pushes the audience to sympathize with his perspective, that Summer callously broke his heart in the end. For many, namely men, it gives them permission to wallow in their own romantic failures, content that they, the main character of their lives, were done wrong. Yet, a more nuanced evaluation of the film makes it clear that Tom puts Summer on a pedestal and views her through a highly idolized lens, and that he was largely the one responsible for his own heartbreak. Now, it's certainly fair to say that Summer was not perfect. Her communication with Tom could have been clearer, but she's certainly not the villain some would care to paint her as. Number 7. First Blood. It seems like a large amount of the people who have seen and proclaim to love the first Rambo film, First Blood, don't actually remember it much at all. First Blood is often held up as one of the greatest guy movies ever. That it's a supremely badass film in which Sylvester Stallone's John Rambo fights back against the cops who dare to challenge him. The public perception of First Blood is coloured massively by its sequels, especially the first two, which majorly upped the ante in terms of violence and action, in turn solidifying Rambo as an action hero in his own right. Yeah, it might surprise many of those who haven't seen First Blood in quite some time that it's actually a much quieter, less bloodthirsty, and less jingoistic movie than its successors. Instead, it's a comparatively restrained thriller about American society's lack of quarter for Vietnam veterans, and more to the point, a film in which Rambo kills just a single person, by accident no less. Yet, people profess to love First Blood because it's an awesome action movie, no matter that mass opinion has been hugely influenced by its more action-packed sequels. Number 6. Magic Mike. Now, in fairness, who is anyone to tell other people how to enjoy a Magic Mike movie, of all things? Yet many eyebrows were raised when Steven Soderbergh was first announced to be directing a movie about male strippers, even if his involvement indicated there'd be much more going on beneath the surface. And truly, there was. Nobody's gonna tell you that you shouldn't savor Channing Tatum and his gloriously chiseled pals gyrating around throughout the movie's pulse-quickening 110 minutes, but what ultimately makes Magic Mike more than a fun but forgettable slice of cheesecake is its surprisingly muscular script. Magic Mike's story unfolds in the shadow of 2008's Great Recession, with Mike, played by Tatum, working as a stripper to fund his dream of running a custom furniture business. That spectre looms large over the entire movie, whether audiences want to believe it or not. By backing the sexy strip show with so much genuinely nuanced character development, we're compelled to view Mike and his pals as more than mere sex objects, as also people hustling to make their dreams come true amid major economic anxiety. Number 5. Falling Down. Not unlike Fight Club, Joel Schumacher's Falling Down is a film which, through its superb filmmaking craft and sheer entertainment value, allowed many to rather miss the point. Falling Down follows William Foster, played by Michael Douglas, as a downtrodden white-collar worker who violently lashes out at the world around him on a hot and stressful day in LA. On a superficial level, many of Foster's more trivial frustrations are entirely relatable, especially the fast food restaurant serving up food that looks nothing like the picture. Yet it becomes increasingly difficult to identify with the man as his rampage progresses. But Falling Down is often glorified in certain circles online, yet any inference that Bill is a good man beaten down by the stresses of everyday life goes up in smoke entirely by the third act, given that Bill is shown to be a psychologically abusive husband and father who, in his final moments, comes to realize that, yes, he actually is the bad guy. In many respects, the nimble genius of Schumacher's film is that it manages to be both a gloriously entertaining black comedy and genuinely fascinating study of a man's implosion over the course of a single day. Number 4. Law-Abiding Citizen. Law-Abiding Citizen is a fascinating movie that, despite being mostly panned by critics, was largely embraced by general audiences. The thriller follows Clyde Shelton, played by Gerald Butler, a man who turns vigilante following the murder of his wife and daughter. Not merely content to take the lives of those responsible, he then turns his aim towards the American justice system itself, embarking on a rampage against basically anyone complicit in upholding its corrupt practices. Though Shelton is certainly a sympathetic figure to begin with, the filmmakers attempted to slowly transition him into a villain by the time we get to the ending, whereby the hero lawyer Nick Rice, played by Jamie Foxx, turns the tables on Shelton and kills him with his own bomb. Yet many ultimately ended up going ride or die with Shelton to the very end, even when he begins killing relatively unimportant folk working in the legal system who are in of themselves powerless to affect any change. Now, to be fair, Butler's deliciously righteous performance combined with the Fox's unintentionally likable hero do make it shockingly easy to root for Shelton to succeed in his ultimate plan of blowing City Hall to smithereens. Yeah, it is a bit concerning that many dare to take its fundamentally schlocky through line seriously and feel that a campaign of domestic terrorism is just what America's justice system needs in order to change its ways. Number 3. Wall Street. Literally decades before Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street galvanized an entire generation of youngsters to see its abusive criminal protagonist as a twisted figure of adoration, Oliver Stone's Wall Street did it with ruthless broker Gordon Gekko, played by Michael Douglas. Though the film unambiguously portrays Gekko as a criminal, he's also a highly charismatic figure whose mantra of greed is good took on a life of its own in a wider culture. Despite the movie's clear intent to show the destructive impact of unrestrained greed, Douglas's Oscar-winning portrayal nevertheless served as an unintentional recruiting ad for the stockbroker industry, with Gekko still inspiring predominantly male youngsters entering the workforce. It seems that many felt that Wall Street granted them permission to indulge their most selfish instincts and listen purely to their ID, in turn ignoring that Gekko's greed leads to his downfall at the film's end. Number 2. Joker. The discourse surrounding Todd Phillips' Joker was exhausting long before the movie even came out, as folk on all sides of the political spectrum worked themselves into a frenzy. On one hand, it's a gritty, elevated origin story for Batman's most iconic foe, with a terrific Oscar-winning performance by Joaquin Phoenix. But for many, they perhaps over-identified with Phoenix's troubled comedian Arthur Fleck. Joker has been vocally embraced by the self-called incel community, who seemingly found kinship with Fleck as a rage-filled social outcast driven to violence. But it probably shouldn't need to be said that Fleck is anything but a figure to be idolized. A fascinating, brilliantly performed one, for sure, but absolutely not one worthy of unironic, uncritical lionization as he has been. Fleck is certainly sympathetic to a point, and the film is most effective in underlining society's failures in supporting its most vulnerable people. But for the character to be held up as a genuine emblem for impotent male rage is rather concerning in its own right. And number 1, Sound of Freedom. Sound of Freedom is certainly one of 2023's most fascinating releases. A Christian-themed thriller about sex trafficking that's likely to gross more at the box office than the Marvels. Yet, the film's commercial success has largely been credited less to its resoundingly mixed reviews than how aggressively it targeted a very particular customer base. That is to say, it was sold primarily to the sizable QAnon community, a controversial far-right conspiracy theorist movement which both star Jim Caviezel and the real-life individual he portrays, Tim Ballard, are proponents of. Though the film itself doesn't contain any QAnon rhetoric, it has nevertheless become a strange battleground in the ongoing culture war, with right-wing moviegoers turning out in droves to support the film. Ultimately, Sound of Freedom's account of sex trafficking has been widely discredited as exaggerated and inaccurate, and while it's decently crafted at face value, it only became a box office smash because its marketing pandered so overpoweringly to some of the most unsavory sectors of society. And that sums up our list of 10 movies that are popular for all the wrong reasons. If you could think of any more, then let us know in the comments down below. And while you're there, drop us a cheeky like, share, and subscribe too. I've been Jem from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you next time.